Bhutan is a country located in the Eastern Himalayas and borders China and India, with Nepal also close by. The people of Bhutan are isolated by their country's geography and for centuries were inaccessible to any Western explorers. Tibetan, Chinese, Nepali, and Indian merchants traded in Bhutan for centuries, but it was only opened for tourists from the West in the 1970s. Bhutan is ruled by a king whose line was first established in the early 20th century by Sir Ugyen Wangchuck, a powerful leader who united Bhutan after centuries of feudal rule. The present fifth king is admired by all Bhutanese as a compassionate and gracious king who loves his people alongside his queen. In Bhutan, there are many ethnic groups and languages, but each speaks the national language of Dzongkha, in addition to English, Nepali, Hindi, and other local languages like Tsangla. The population of Bhutan is largely represented by the Ngalong people in the west and the Sharchup people in the east, with other ethno-linguistic groups like the Khenpa and Bumthangpa inhabiting areas of central Bhutan. The Himalayas separate Bhutan into several valleys, which over time accounted for the linguistic and cultural differences that are still observable today. Early in its history, Bhutan was called Mon Yul, and in fact is referred to by the Bhutanese today as Druk Yul, or the land of the thunder dragon. This name comes from the legend of a great dragon who lives in the valleys of Bhutan. Despite being ancient, the lands of Bhutan were first brought together by a military and religious leader whose power rivaled the neighboring Dalai Lama of Tibet in the 16th century. In the year 1594, Ngawang Namgyal was born and grew to a position of high standing at his monastery in Tibet. The Ralung Monastery was the seat of a specific sect of Buddhism called Drukpa Kagyu Buddhism, and Ngawang was expected to become one of its hierarchs. However, he was forced to flee and went south from Tibet into the valleys that would one day be united into the Kingdom of Bhutan. Though isolated by mountains, this area had maintained some distinct cultural features which were observed by Ngawang. He came to power and established rule by conquering other clans and religious leaders who opposed him. He built great fortresses called dzongs, which still stand today as the primary religious and political establishments in the country. Though his reign was long and his life was full of achievements, his death brought a crisis to Bhutan. For years, his death was kept a secret, and the great fifth Dalai Lama had assumed that his own occultic powers had caused Ngawang to succumb to illness. At this time, the enemies of Bhutan began to look for ways to exploit these newfound weaknesses. Yet the country survived and was led by Penlups, who claimed various songs around the country for the next few centuries, until finally Ugyen Wangchuck established the current dynasty. Ngawang's reforms in the 16th century, through his conquests and building achievements, gave Bhutan a cultural identity as well as a religious identity. The Bhutanese had been Buddhist since the time of the Guru Padmasambhava in the 8th century, with the largest mass conversion taking place later in the 13th century after the rediscovery of his teachings. However, Ngawang Namgyal had brought Drukpa Kagyu Buddhism to Bhutan and had established a new religious order to govern the monastic affairs of Bhutan. He appointed a new High Lama called the Je Kempo to oversee all the monks in Bhutan and allowed him authority over every monastery. The headquarters of the religious and political authority resided in the dzongs themselves. These towering cathedral fortress hybrids still dot Bhutan's landscape to this day and are one of the primary tourist attractions for both religious and casual tourists. Through the years of Western exploration into Tibet and Central Asia, Bhutan was also visited by the British on several missions. Their aims were to establish diplomatic relationships with the new government under Ugyen Wangchuck, who had been appointed as a knight commander for his role in the British expedition to Lhasa in 1904 under Francis Younghusband. In 1907, Ugyen Wangchuck was unanimously chosen as the hereditary monarch by all of the people in Bhutan at the old capital of Punakha. The line of succession would pass from father to son all the way to the present day. Though on good footing with the British, the Bhutanese were a small country amidst two of the largest nations in the world in India and China. Their concern for their unique culture and religious practices was a reason for the initial hesitancy towards inviting tourists from the outside or other foreigners to live in the country. Bhutan was not modernized until late in the 20th century, receiving many of the inventions such as television and internet decades later than the rest of Southern Asia. This was not problematic for many of the people, however, who preferred a traditional and simple way of life among communities that had been in place for generations. As such, the fourth king of Bhutan, Jigme Singye Wangchu, shocked his citizens when he first introduced the idea of implementing democracy in Bhutan. This was an effort to balance the traditional rule of dynasty with modern governance, and after careful planning, Bhutan became a constitutional monarchy in the year 2008. Additionally, the fourth king abdicated the throne in favor of his son, the present king, Jigme Khesar Namgyel Wangchu. Though Bhutan has been misunderstood by many and unheard of by most, it is truly one of the most unique and fascinating countries in the world. Visiting Bhutan is perhaps the closest one can get to the feeling of exploring a real-life Shangri-La, which is complete with all of the history, exploration, and kind-hearted people who make such journeys so worthwhile.